He was just trying to catch his favorite toy. One leap, 1 second, and everything changed. A playful puppy falls off a bridge in front of dozens of shocked onlookers. But what happened next? No one could have ever seen coming. Before I tell you what happened after he disappeared over that bridge, can I ask you something quick? If you believe stories like this matter, stories about loyalty, survival, and second chances, please hit that subscribe button. Most people just watch and scroll away, but your one small click, it could help this story reach someone who really needs to hear it today. This was supposed to be a perfect day, a clear sky, a beautiful view from a scenic bridge, and a woman playing with her dog, just the two of them, enjoying their quiet moment. But one innocent game of fetch turned into a heart-stopping moment that had everyone gasping for breath. And the story, it doesn't end the way you think it will. Her name was Emily. She wasn't famous. She wasn't flashy. And if you passed her in a crowd, you probably wouldn't notice her. But if you looked closely, really looked, you'd see something in her eyes. A softness, a quiet kind of hurt, the kind that doesn't scream. It just lingers. Emily had just moved to a small mountain town in Arizona, a place where most people knew each other by name, and the biggest excitement was a new flavor at the local ice cream shop. That's exactly why she picked it. She didn't want noise. She didn't want distraction. She wanted peace, silence, a reset. She came with 2 suitcases, a stack of books, and a broken heart. A few months earlier, her life had fallen apart. A long-term relationship that ended without warning. A career that drained her day by day until she couldn't recognize herself anymore. She had spent too long giving to people who never gave back. And finally, she just walked away from it all. But healing alone isn't easy. Silence can grow heavy. Some days, Emily didn't speak to anyone, and that silence, it started to feel more like a weight than a comfort, until Max came along. Max wasn't planned. He was a happy accident in the form of a golden retriever mix, rescued from a crowded shelter 3 towns over. She hadn't meant to adopt a dog. She only went there to look around. But the moment she saw him, big ears, big eyes, and that goofy pink tongue, something shifted inside her. He was sitting at the back of the kennel, not barking like the others, just watching, calm, like he already knew her. She crouched down, smiled, and whispered, "Hi there." And Max stood up, walked over, and gently placed his paw against the gate. That was it. The next morning, Max was in her passenger seat, tail thumping wildly, head hanging out the window. Emily looked over at him and, for the first time in months, laughed. Not a fake laugh, not polite, a real one. He saved her that day, and he didn't even know it. Over the weeks, they became inseparable. Emily worked remotely, so Max was always nearby, curled at her feet during Zoom meetings, resting his head on her lap during late-night movies, and waiting outside the bathroom door like a tiny, loyal guard. Their favorite routine, though, was their weekend ritual. Every Saturday morning, they visited the bridge. It wasn't a tourist spot, not really, just a tall, quiet bridge on the outskirts of town, with thick concrete railings, and a breathtaking view of the canyon below. Down there, a ribbon of river flowed through layers of red rock, calm and slow like time had forgotten it. Emily loved standing there, letting the wind brush her hair, watching Max sniff every inch of the walkway like it was a new adventure every single time. There was something spiritual about that bridge, like it belonged to them. That Saturday morning was no different. The sun rose early, casting golden streaks through the kitchen window. Emily poured her coffee, added just a splash of oat milk, and called out, "Max, you ready?" He came bounding in like he always did, tail spinning like a propeller, mouth already open in a doggy smile. She clipped on his leash, grabbed his favorite pink frisbee, now soft at the edges from weeks of play, and headed out. The bridge wasn't far. A short drive up a winding road through trees and wildflowers. The kind of road where you roll the windows down and just breathe. They parked, stepped out, and the moment Max's paws hit the ground, he started pulling ahead, eager. Emily laughed, letting him take the lead. At the bridge, she unclipped the leash, just like always. "Go get it, buddy," she smiled, tossing the frisbee. Max chased after it, barking with joy, legs stretched wide, his ears flapping in the breeze. He brought it back proudly, tail wagging so hard it shook his whole body. She threw it again, and again, and again. He never got tired of it. And then she threw it one more time, a little higher this time, a little harder, just for fun. Max sprinted forward, but this time something changed. A gust of wind, sudden and sharp, pushed the frisbee off course. Not by much, just enough to tilt it toward the edge. Emily didn't think much of it at first. The bridge had high concrete walls, after all. She trusted them, but Max didn't notice the curve. He was too locked in. His eyes, laser-focused on that frisbee, didn't register the narrowing ledge ahead. His feet kept moving. His mouth opened. The toy hovered just beyond reach. And then he jumped. Not high, not far, just enough to catch it. But there was no solid ground beneath him anymore. The world stopped. Emily didn't scream. Not right away. Her breath caught in her throat as her brain tried to understand what her eyes had just seen. Max, had disappeared from view. The frisbee hit the canyon wall, bounced once, then vanished into the river below. For half a second, she thought maybe, just maybe, he'd come running back, tail wagging, like he always did. Maybe he'd just dipped out of sight for a second, but he didn't. There was only stillness, and then a single sound, a splash. Not the kind that came from a child jumping into a pool. No laughter, no joy. It was the sound of something falling hard, hitting water that wasn't ready for it. Emily dropped the leash. She bolted toward the edge, her knees scraping against the concrete as she fell to all fours and peered over the side. Her eyes darted left, then right, then down, and there he was, Max, far, far below, flailing. His golden fur looked darker now, soaked and weighed down. His legs were moving fast, but he wasn't going anywhere. The water was moving quicker than it looked from above. He was trying, desperately, to stay above the surface. Emily's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her hands shook. No. The bridge felt suddenly enormous, cold, unsafe. People were gathering behind her now. Strangers, voices whispering. Someone gasped. A man said, "Oh my God, it's a dog." Another woman murmured, "Did he jump?" But Emily didn't hear them. Her ears were filled with the sound of rushing water and the dull roar of her own pulse. Her eyes never left the spot where Max fought to keep afloat. He was turning in circles now, caught in a small current that whipped around the rocks like a watery trap. She couldn't move. Her body was frozen, her legs numb. Her brain screamed at her, "Do something," but her body refused to listen. She clutched the railing with white knuckles and shouted, "Max, Max, baby, swim, swim to the side." He couldn't hear her. He was too far and too panicked. His legs were slowing. His head kept dipping lower between strokes. His mouth opened as if trying to bark, but only bubbles surfaced. Tears blurred Emily's vision. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. She turned and looked around helplessly. "Somebody, please, I need help." A man with a camera around his neck rushed to the edge, peering over. Another woman had already pulled out her phone and was dialing frantically, but no one moved. No one climbed over the side. No one jumped, because the canyon was steep, rocky, and the river wasn't exactly close. It wasn't a quick sprint down. There was no ladder, no stairs, no easy access. Even if someone wanted to help, it would take time. Time Max didn't have. Emily stumbled back from the ledge. She turned in a frantic circle, trying to find some way, any way, to get to the bottom. And that's when she saw the narrow dirt path off to the right. It wasn't obvious, probably used by fishermen or hikers who knew the area better than tourists did, but it was something. She bolted for it. "Stay here," someone yelled behind her, but she didn't listen. She ran like her life depended on it, but it wasn't her life. It was Max's. The path was narrow, with jagged rocks and loose dirt. One wrong step, and she could have slipped herself. But she didn't stop, not for anything. She skidded around corners, branches whipping her arms and face. Her lungs burned, her eyes stung. She could still hear the river in the distance, but she couldn't see Max anymore. Was he still fighting? Was he even still? She shoved the thought away. She had to believe he was okay. Minutes felt like hours. Her legs were giving out. Her ankle twisted more than once. But finally, she saw the clearing. The bottom of the canyon opened up like a secret world, towering walls on either side, the river winding through the middle like a giant snake, and just up ahead movement. Emily's heart leapt. There, clinging to a cluster of fallen branches lodged between two boulders, was Max. Barely. Only his head was visible now, resting on the driftwood. His eyes were half closed. He didn't see her. She screamed his name, so loud her throat tore. "Max." His ears twitched. Barely. She pushed forward, stumbling across the rocky shore, tearing her shoes open on the jagged stone. But then, sudden panic. The current shifted again. The log rolled slightly. Max's body slipped, just a few inches, but it was enough to make her feel like she was about to collapse. "No, hold on, Max. I'm coming." But she wasn't close enough. Not yet. There were still 10 feet of sharp riverbank between her and the water, and no way to reach him from the shore. She dropped to her knees, looking around frantically for anything, a branch, a rope, something she could throw out to him. There was nothing, just rocks, water, and the impossible space between them. Emily looked at the river, then at Max, and then back at the water again. Her brain screamed at her to jump in, but the current was faster than it looked, even from just a few feet away. She could feel it pulling around the rocks. She wasn't a strong swimmer, not anymore. She hadn't been in deep water since she was a teenager. And this wasn't a swimming pool. This was a cold, unpredictable river slicing through a canyon. The kind of river that looked peaceful until you were in it. Still, she stepped forward. Her foot entered the water. The cold hit like a punch to the chest. Her breath caught. She took another step. "Okay, Max, hold on, baby. I'm right here. I'm coming, okay?" she whispered. But just as she prepared to take another step, a voice behind her shouted, "Don't." She turned sharply. There was a man, tall, scruffy, about 40, running toward her from the trail. Mud splattered his pants. A camera bag bounced against his side. "I saw what happened," he yelled out of breath. "Don't go in. You won't make it." "I have to," Emily shouted back. Her voice cracked. "He's going to drown." The man looked past her to Max, who hadn't moved. "I know," he said, calmer now. "That's why I'm going in." Before she could say another word, he dropped the bag, tore off his jacket, and kicked off his shoes. "Wait, what's your name?" He glanced at her, already stepping into the freezing water. "Jake." And then he dove. The river swallowed him instantly. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. Jake resurfaced seconds later, fighting the current, his arms cutting through the water as he swam hard toward Max. Emily stood frozen on the shore, her hands trembling, helpless to do anything but watch. "Come on, come on, come on," she whispered over and over. Jake was strong, focused. He swam like a man who didn't doubt what he was doing, even though the river threw everything at him. Twice, the current shoved him sideways, nearly into the rocks. But he adjusted, kept going, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the driftwood where Max clung. He reached out carefully, one hand braced on the log, the other gently wrapped around Max's soaking harness. Emily held her breath. Max didn't struggle. He was too tired. His head barely lifted as Jake supported him. Emily could see Jake whispering something, maybe to calm him, maybe to calm himself. She didn't know. Then slowly, carefully, he turned them both around and began swimming back. The current wasn't kind. Each foot forward was a battle. Jake's face tightened with effort, his arms strained, but he never let go. Not even once. It was like watching someone carry the weight of the world, except it was a dog who meant everything to her. Emily dropped to her knees the moment they reached the shallow part. Jake stumbled out of the river first, gasping. His arms shook from exhaustion. Then came Max, shivering uncontrollably, eyes half closed but alive. Emily lunged forward, wrapping her arms around Max, pulling him close. I've got you, baby," she whispered. "You're okay now. I've got you." Jake collapsed beside them, dripping and breathless. Emily looked at him through teary eyes. "You saved him," she said, her voice barely a whisper. You saved him." Jake smiled faintly, chest still heaving. "He made it easy. He didn't bite me or anything." Emily laughed, a choked, broken laugh, but it was real. It was the kind of laugh that only comes after surviving the unthinkable. A few minutes passed before any of them spoke again. Emily took off her jacket and wrapped Max in it. He was still shaking but breathing steady. She stroked his fur, whispering softly, apologizing over and over, even though it wasn't her fault. Jake sat nearby, wringing out his shirt, his hands scraped and red. "How did you even get down here so fast?" Emily finally asked. "I was taking photos from the far side," he said. "Saw the fall. I figured I could beat the current if I took the lower trail." She nodded slowly, still stunned. Jake looked at Max. "He's a lucky dog." Emily wiped a tear from her cheek. "I'm the lucky one." Up above, more people had gathered. Some leaned over the edge, pointing. Others filmed. One man called down, "Do you need us to call someone?" Emily waved him off. "We're okay. He's safe." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she believed it. Max was safe. Not because of luck, not entirely. Because someone chose to act. Because a total stranger, someone who could have just stood there and watched, did the unthinkable, and jumped in. Max was still shivering, but he was looking up at her now. His nose twitched as he smelled her jacket, and his tail barely gave one little wag. That was all she needed. Emily let out a breath she didn't even know she'd been holding for 10 full minutes. "Can you walk?" she whispered, brushing a wet strand of fur away from his eyes. "Can you stand, Max?" He blinked slowly. Then, with visible effort, he shifted his front paws under him and pushed up just enough to lift his head off the jacket, but his legs gave out. Emily looked up at Jake in panic. "He can't move." Jake knelt beside them. "He's exhausted, probably bruised, too." That was a long fall. He needs rest. A vet, she nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Jake looked around. There's a ranger station about a mile through the trail. They'll have a radio or something, maybe even a four-wheeler to help get him out. Emily hesitated. I can't leave him. You won't have to, he said. You stay here. I'll go. Before she could protest, he stood, picked up his bag, and took off jogging up the path. She turned back to Max. His breathing was slow but steady. His eyes were half closed now, not from danger, but from exhaustion. She stroked his ears gently. I thought I lost you, she whispered. The sun was beginning to dip behind the canyon walls, casting long golden shadows across the rocks. The light caught Max's fur just right, making him glow. Even soaking wet and muddy, he looked beautiful. She thought back to the first day they met, how he had quietly walked to the edge of his kennel and placed his paw on the gate. That quiet moment had changed her life. Now, she was watching his life hang by a thread. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, Max. I should have seen the wind shift. I should have been more careful. She wasn't blaming herself because it was logical. She was blaming herself because that's what people do when they almost lose the thing they love most. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. She wasn't sure. Then footsteps. She looked up, bracing herself. Jake was back, and behind him was a man in a green uniform and a baseball cap with a faded park logo. A forest ranger. He was carrying a radio and dragging a narrow, fold-up stretcher behind him. Let's get your boy up and out, the ranger said. Working together, they gently lifted Max onto the stretcher. He whimpered once, just once, but didn't struggle. He trusted them. They used the straps to secure him, tucked Emily's jacket around his sides, and slowly made their way back up the trail. The climb wasn't easy. The trail was narrow, and Jake had to take most of the back weight, his face pale from the strain. But he didn't complain once. Every few steps, Emily would whisper to Max, "We're almost there. You're doing amazing. Just hold on." At the top of the trail, the ranger's ATV was waiting. They loaded Max in carefully and drove him to a small ranger station just beyond the tree line. From there, they called the local vet, who agreed to meet them at the clinic within the hour. Emily followed in her car, her hands shaking the whole drive. She kept looking over at Max lying across the back seat, his head resting on her crumpled jacket, his breathing soft but steady. She couldn't stop staring at him, because in those quiet minutes, she realized something. She had come to this town to escape heartbreak, but somewhere along the way, she'd fallen completely in love again, with a dog. And now, she almost lost that love before she even got the chance to truly hold on to it. The vet clinic was small, tucked between a hardware store and a diner that smelled like bacon. But inside, it was clean and quiet. The vet, an older woman with soft eyes and a calming voice, rushed to meet them at the door. She examined Max quickly but gently. "No broken bones," she said, "but he's bruised, sore, and in mild shock. He's lucky." Emily let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "Yeah, he is." The vet smiled kindly. "He'll need a few days of rest, maybe pain meds, but he's going to be okay." Emily nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Thank you." Jake had waited quietly outside during the exam. When Emily stepped out, he stood up. "How is he asked. "He's going to be okay," she said, her voice thick. Jake let out a breath and smiled. "Good, that's good." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything still hanging in the air. Then she looked up at him, really looked. "You didn't have to jump in," she said. He shrugged. "Yeah, I did." Emily smiled softly at Jake's answer. "Yeah, I did." There was no bravado in his voice, no dramatics, just quiet truth. He hadn't done it for praise. He hadn't done it for attention. He had seen a dog in trouble and a woman who looked like she was about to fall apart, and he acted. Simple as that. The world needed more people like Jake. They walked side by side back to the parking lot. The sun was almost completely gone now, casting the small town in the dusky blue of early evening. The air had cooled, but Emily hardly noticed. "Do you need a ride back?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "I'm parked just down the street, but thank you." She looked down at her scraped hands, then up again. "I really don't know how to thank you enough." "You already did," he replied, glancing at the window where Max was resting under the vet's care. "You got him here. He's alive. That's all that matters." Emily felt her throat tighten again. "Still," she whispered, "you didn't hesitate. You just jumped." Jake nodded slowly. "Some things don't give you time to think." He turned to leave, then paused. "If you ever need help again, or someone to toss a frisbee that doesn't fly off a bridge, just let me know." Emily let out a small laugh. "I might just take you up on that." He smiled, nodded once, then disappeared into the twilight. Back inside, the vet allowed Emily to sit with Max for a while. The exam room was quiet now, lit by a soft overhead lamp. The smell of antiseptic lingered faintly in the air, but Emily barely noticed. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside Max's bed, gently stroking the dry part of his ear. He was resting comfortably now, hooked up to a small four bag and wrapped in warm towels. His eyes opened occasionally, just enough to check if she was still there. Every time they did, she whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. Her mind wandered back to all the little moments they'd shared in the past few months. The morning he spilled her coffee by wagging too hard. The night he jumped onto the bed during a thunderstorm and refused to leave her side. The day he barked at a plastic bag in the wind like it was a monster from another dimension. He was more than a pet. He was the one constant in a world that had been anything but steady. And today had reminded her violently just how fragile that connection was, just how quickly things could change. One jump, one misstep, one gust of wind, and she could have lost him forever. A soft knock came at the door. It was the vet, holding a clipboard. "He's stable," she said gently, "but I'd like to keep him overnight just to be safe." Emily nodded. "Of course. You can stay a little longer if you want. He'll rest better with you nearby." "Thank you." The door clicked shut again, and Emily leaned her head back against the wall. Outside the window, a few stars had begun to appear. The town was quiet. A few cars passed in the distance. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. Max stirred, nudging his nose toward her hand. She smiled through the tears that hadn't quite dried. "You scared me, you know that?" He gave a low sigh, the kind dogs do when they're safe again. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out the only thing she had left from earlier, a torn corner of Max's pink frisbee. It had cracked when it hit the rocks, and part of it had ended up in her jacket pocket during the chaos. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she placed it beside him on the blanket, like a medal of survival, a reminder of what nearly happened and what didn't. That night, as she finally made her way back to her empty house, something felt different. It wasn't just the adrenaline fading, it was perspective, because up until that day, the bridge had been her favorite place, a symbol of healing, a spot of peace. Now, it was something else entirely, not ruined but changed. It had almost taken the one thing she couldn't live without, and yet, because of one stranger's bravery and one dog's will to survive, it hadn't. Maybe that's what healing really was, not forgetting what hurt you, but surviving it, and holding tighter to the things that remind you why life is still beautiful. Emily couldn't sleep that night. She tried. God, she tried. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw that moment again. Max leaping after the frisbee, his paws slipping, that split second where his body vanished from the edge of the bridge. She sat in bed, wrapped in a blanket, staring at her phone. Her hand hovered over Jake's contact, the number he had given her before leaving the clinic. She didn't text. Not yet. Instead, she opened her camera roll. There was a video she'd taken a few days earlier. Max in the backyard, chasing butterflies and barking at his own tail. She pressed play. He was so full of life, and he still was. That was the miracle. That was what she couldn't stop thinking about. He could have died, but he didn't. Because of timing, because of a stranger, because of something that felt a little like fate. And as the sun began to rise behind the mountains once again, Emily knew one thing for sure. Life would never be the same again. The vet called the next morning. "Emily," she said gently, "you want to come in? Max is awake, and he's trying to stand." That one sentence was all it took. Emily didn't bother with coffee, didn't eat. She threw on the first sweater she could find and drove straight to the clinic, her heart pounding harder with every turn of the road. When she arrived, Max was lying in a clean blanket, his head lifted weakly, eyes brighter than they'd been the night before. His tail gave a small, slow wag when he saw her. Emily dropped to the floor beside him, tears already welling up again. "You little fighter," she whispered, cupping his face in her hands. "You really still here?" Max leaned into her touch. The vet explained that he'd been bruised up from a fall and might have pulled a muscle in his back leg, but there was no spinal damage, no internal bleeding, nothing they couldn't handle with rest and care. "He's lucky," she repeated, not for the first time. But Emily didn't think it was luck anymore. It was something deeper, maybe even divine. She brought Max home that afternoon. He walked on his own, slowly, one limp in his back leg, but he walked. Emily kept a close watch, carrying him up the porch steps and making him a soft bed beside the fireplace, where he could rest without effort. For the next several days, their life slowed down. There were no frisbees, no long hikes, just quiet moments, lots of them. Emily worked from home, barely leaving his side. She made him boiled chicken and rice. She massaged his legs gently at night. She sang to him, even though she was tone deaf, and the only one who'd ever appreciated it was Max. And he stayed by her, even as he healed, even as his energy returned. He never wandered far. Something had changed, maybe in both of them, but as the days passed, one question lingered quietly in Emily's mind, one she hadn't dared speak aloud until now. Why had he jumped? Why hadn't he stopped at the edge? Why hadn't he barked, or hesitated, or waited for her voice? She replayed the moment in her mind 100 times, maybe more. The pink frisbee, the wind, the curve of its flight as it floated toward the edge. It had always been Max's favorite toy. He'd spent hours chasing it in the park, on trails, even in the living room. But it was just a toy, so why risk everything for it? Later that week, Emily returned to the bridge, not to relive the moment, but to face it, to understand it. She left Max home with a neighbor. It felt wrong to go back without him, but she didn't want to stress him out. Not again. He needed calm. She parked the car and walked slowly onto the bridge, her fingers trailing the cold metal of the railing. From the center, she could see the canyon below, the same river that had nearly taken Max's life. It didn't look dangerous now. It looked beautiful, serene, deceptively gentle. She found the spot where they had stood, the same place where she had thrown the frisbee, and she saw it. Not the frisbee, it was long gone, but something else. A small plaque, bolted into the side of the railing, just above where Max had jumped. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it caught the light, just enough to shimmer. Emily leaned in. It was a dedication plate, to someone's dog, Ranger, 2009 to 2022. Forever my best friend, it read. You made this place magical. Her throat caught. Suddenly, she remembered something from that day. Max had hesitated right before the leap. She hadn't noticed it then. Her eyes were locked on the frisbee too, but now she could picture it. He hadn't just chased the toy. He'd paused at the plaque. Maybe he saw something. Maybe he felt something. Or maybe it was just timing, and her brain was trying to turn a near tragedy into something poetic. But deep down, she didn't think so. Dogs sense things people couldn't, and now she couldn't help but wonder if Max had felt the presence of something, or someone, at that very spot. Emily sat down on the cold concrete, pulling her sweater tight around her. The canyon wind brushed past her face. The silence was heavy, but peaceful. She didn't have the answers. Maybe she never would. But what she did know, more than anything else, was that she'd never take another moment for granted. Not with Max. Not with anyone she loved. Because life was that fragile, and that powerful. Both. The days moved slowly after that. Max continued to recover, limping less, sleeping more soundly. He started nudging Emily with his nose when it was time for breakfast again. He even barked at the mailman, just like he used to. To anyone else, things looked back to normal, but Emily felt changed. She didn't talk much about what had happened, not to neighbors, not even to her parents on the phone. She kept the story locked in a quiet corner of her heart, where it felt too sacred to cheapen with casual words. Still, life had to go on, and as Max grew stronger, part of her worried, would they ever go back to the bridge? Would they ever have that place again, without fear wrapping itself around every memory? A week later, a package arrived at Emily's doorstep. There was no return address. Inside was a small box wrapped in tissue paper. She opened it carefully. It was a brand new pink frisbee. Same size, same style, same slight bend on the edge. But this one had something extra, etched on the underside in tiny black letters. You both jumped that day. Jake. Emily sat down on the floor right there at the doorway, pressing the frisbee to her chest. It hit her like a wave. She had jumped, maybe not into the river, but into something else just as deep, into fear, into grief, into love. She didn't realize she was crying until Max patted over and placed his head in her lap. Do you want to go back? She whispered. Max looked up at her. No wag, no bark, just stillness. She took that as a yes. The following Sunday, Emily packed up the car. This time, no leash, no frisbee, just Max in the back seat, sitting calmly, staring out the window like he understood. She drove slowly, her hands tight on the wheel. As they pulled up to the bridge, the wind was soft, not like that day. The sun was bright and warm, melting the chill from the air. It felt forgiving. They walked side by side, Max's limp barely noticeable now. Emily avoided the exact spot at first. She didn't want to force it. Instead, they wandered to the opposite end, just walking. Just breathing. It wasn't until Max stopped, looked back, and turned his head toward that place. That one place. That she understood. He was ready before she was. She walked with him, slowly, until they stood together at the same railing, the same drop, Emily tightened her grip on Max's harness. Her heart beat faster, but he didn't look down. He looked up, toward the sky, toward the air above the canyon, toward the place where wind moved, where freedom lived, and maybe where something unseen had caught him when he fell. Maybe. She pulled out the new frisbee. She hadn't planned on using it, but Max's eyes lit up the second he saw it. He didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He simply sat, waiting. Emily smiled. "Okay, boy, let's try this again." She threw it, not hard, just a gentle toss into the open field behind the bridge. Max took off. No hesitation, no fear, only joy. And Emily cried again. But this time, the tears weren't from fear. They were from something else. Relief, gratitude, closure. Because this wasn't just a return to a location. This was a return to life. As they walked back toward the car, Emily heard someone call her name. She turned. It was Jake, hands in his pockets. Same scruffy beard, same calm expression. "I figured you'd come back eventually," he said. Emily blinked. "You, how did you?" He shrugged. "Small town. And I check in at the ranger station sometimes." She smiled. "You really didn't have to send this," she said, holding up the frisbee. He looked at Max. "Yeah, I did." There was something quiet between them, something not rushed, not forced, just understood. Emily looked at the edge of the bridge again, then back at Jake. "I still don't understand how he survived that fall," she said softly. "The way he landed, the river, the driftwood." Jake nodded. "Some things don't have an explanation," he said. "Some things are just meant to be." Max barked suddenly, as if in agreement. Emily laughed. Jake smiled, and for the first time since that terrifying moment, everything felt whole again. Not perfect, but whole. They stood in silence a moment longer, letting the wind pass between them. Then Emily knelt next to Max, scratched behind his ears, and whispered, "Let's go home." And this time, it wasn't just about leaving a place. It was about finally letting go of the fear that had held her heart hostage since that one second, the second that changed everything. But didn't take everything. Because love, real love, isn't fragile. It falls. It breaks. It gets carried by rivers and wind and chance. And somehow it survives. A few weeks had passed since Emily and Max had returned to the bridge. Life was slowly slipping back into rhythm, but something still lingered. A question, a mystery. How had Max survived the fall? It came up in Emily's thoughts late at night. It echoed when she brushed his fur, when she watched him sleep, when she walked past the corner of the bridge where it all happened. The vet had said it didn't make sense. Jake had hinted it was fate, but Emily needed more. So she went looking. She returned to the ranger station one morning with a small notepad in hand. The same ranger who had helped carry Max was working behind the counter. He smiled when he saw her. "How's the pup?" he asked. "Better," Emily said. "Strong, happy, good to hear. He's a lucky dog." "Yeah," she hesitated. "That's actually why I came." The ranger raised an eyebrow. She leaned forward. "The day of the fall, was anyone else in the canyon? Any campers, hikers, anyone who might have seen something down there?" He scratched his chin. "Funny you ask." Emily's heart jumped. "There was a local man fishing down by the bend," he continued. "Old guy, retired firefighter. He radios in when he heads out. Just a safety thing." Emily leaned in. "Do you have his name?" An hour later, she was knocking on a screen door 2 blocks off Main Street. A gray-bearded man answered, his face weathered and kind. "Can I help you?" She explained everything. Her voice shook by the end, but she got it out. The man nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I remember the dog. I saw it fall." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "I thought for sure it wasn't going to make it. That's a long drop. Rough water." I dropped my rod. Ran over, just in time to see something catch him. Emily blinked. "Catch him?" The man nodded again, his eyes narrowing like he was still trying to believe it himself. There was a pile of old driftwood right under the fall zone. Been building up for months. Branches, logs, even a broken canoe stuck in there. Emily waited, afraid to breathe. "But here's the thing," he said. "The way that dog hit, it was like something shifted, like the whole pile moved." "Moved?" "Yeah, like the logs rolled just enough to cushion him, like they knew." Emily felt a chill crawl up her arms. "I watched him hit, roll, and somehow land in the softest pocket of the entire mess. Didn't even touch the water." She blinked. That doesn't seem possible." He nodded. "Exactly." Emily walked back to her car in a daze. She sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, and for the first time since the fall, she didn't feel fear. She felt awe. Something had moved for Max that day. Something beyond logic, beyond understanding. Was it fate? Was it the spirit of the dog on that plaque? Was it just love? She didn't know, but now she didn't need to. That night, Max was curled up at her feet, while she read a book on the couch. The room was quiet, peaceful. She reached down, resting her hand on his back. He opened one eye, just enough to acknowledge her, and for the first time, she whispered the words she'd been holding in her heart since the fall. "You were meant to stay, weren't you?" His tail thumped once against the floor. Emily smiled. "Yeah, I think so too." The next weekend, she and Jake took Max on a hike, not to the bridge, but somewhere new. A quiet trail through a grove of tall pine trees. There were no cliffs, no edges, just earth and sky. Emily threw the frisbee, carefully, and Max chased it. Not recklessly, not fearfully, just joyfully. Jake jogged ahead, laughing when Max ran right past him with the frisbee in his mouth like a trophy. Emily paused at the base of a tree, watching them, and in that moment, she realized something. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. A new chapter built on second chances, quiet miracles, and the unbreakable bond between a girl who needed healing and a dog who refused to let go. Sometimes, life doesn't warn you. There's no flashing sign, no dramatic music, no voice saying, everything is about to change. Sometimes, it just happens. A gust of wind, a leap, a single terrifying moment, and then you're left standing in wreckage, wondering how you'll put the pieces back together. But sometimes, somehow, the pieces do come back together. Not perfectly, not like before, but stronger. That's what Emily learned. That love isn't something soft. It isn't fragile. It's not a candle in the wind. It's the wind. It moves you, breaks you, catches you when everything else lets go. When Max fell from that bridge, something inside Emily broke wide open. The fear of loss, the weight of helplessness, the split-second knowledge that what you love most can be taken in a blink. But in that same moment, something else was born. A deeper understanding, a trust that goes beyond leash and collar, a connection that doesn't need words. Because Max didn't just fall that day. He reminded her, and all of us, that love doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it jumps without thinking. Sometimes it survives when it shouldn't. And sometimes it comes back stronger than ever. So now, when Emily stands on that bridge again, she doesn't see the fall. She sees the return. She sees the miracle, the second chance. And most of all, she sees Max, tail wagging, eyes bright, still running, still chasing, still here. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true animal stories every week.